Move away from that table. Officer Grant Mercer's voice cut across the nearly empty community hall just as Naomi Bennett placed the final constituent letter into a blue folder. She looked up from behind the registration table, unsure whether he was speaking to someone else. Mercer pointed directly at her. You. This section is reserved for state officials. Naomi glanced at the polished nameplate in front of her, then back at the white officer standing beneath the bright ceiling lights. My name is on your event sheet, she said. He did not check it. Instead, he stepped closer, gripped the edge of the folding table, and shoved it sideways. The table tipped, sending folders, pens, bottled water, and carefully organized briefing papers sliding across the hardwood floor. A silver nameplate struck the ground and landed face down. Mercer looked at the black woman standing amid the scattered documents and said loudly enough for the entire hall to hear, "She does not belong here." The room went silent. Near the front row, a retired veteran stopped unfolding his program. A volunteer froze beside a stack of chairs. Above them, a small camera mounted near the stage continued streaming the room to the state's public event website. Mercer never looked up. If stories about dignity, justice, and ordinary people standing against abuse of authority matter to you, subscribe and stay with this story, because the truth already recording inside that room would soon reach far beyond its walls. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not demand recognition. She stood beside the overturned table in a light brown suit, her hands relaxed at her sides, studying Mercer with the calm precision that had carried her through courtrooms, committee hearings, and years of public service. "Officer, verify the event sheet," she said. "I do not need instructions from you." "Then contact the event coordinator." I said, "Step away from the restricted area." A younger officer named Caleb Ross stood near the entrance holding the security briefing packet. He looked down at the page in his hand, then toward Naomi. Her photograph appeared beside the words State Senator Naomi Bennett, Community Listening Session, co-host. Ross shifted uneasily. "Maybe we should verify first," he said. Mercer did not turn around. "I know who belongs in this room." Naomi's eyes moved briefly to Ross, then to the red light blinking on Mercer's body camera. She noticed the hallway camera, the stage camera, and the phone slowly rising in the hands of Thomas Reed, the retired veteran in the first row. There were already too many records for the moment to disappear. Mercer reached down and picked up Naomi's identification card from the floor. He examined the state seal, then looked at her as though the card itself were another challenge. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It was issued to me." "That is not what I asked." "It is the answer." His jaw tightened. Behind him, the community hall doors opened and Naomi's legislative assistant, Elena Ruiz, hurried inside carrying a laptop and a box of printed agendas. She stopped when she saw the overturned table. "Senator Bennett, what happened?" Mercer turned sharply. "Stay back." Elena stared at him. "She is the senator hosting this event. I will determine that." Naomi looked at the papers spread across the floor. One folder contained housing complaints from families facing eviction. Another held reports from residents who believed local police complaints had been ignored. She bent slightly to retrieve them. Mercer lifted one hand. "Do not touch anything. This area is now under security control." Naomi straightened. Her face remained calm, but something in her eyes hardened. "The time is 6:42 in the evening," she said clearly. "We are inside the Eastwood Community Hall. Officer Grant Mercer has overturned a constituent services table, taken my identification, and refused to verify the official event list." Mercer stared at her. "Stop narrating." Naomi looked directly at the blinking camera on his chest. "Then stop creating a record worth narrating." Mercer kept Naomi's identification card in his hand as though possession of it gave him authority over the truth printed across its surface. Elena set the laptop and box of agendas on the nearest chair, then moved no closer. "Officer, I am Senator Bennett's legislative assistant," she said. "Her name, photograph, and role are listed in the security packet your department received yesterday." Mercer looked toward Ross without turning his body. "Check the packet." Ross had already checked it. The page remained open in his hands, Naomi's official photograph visible beneath the hall lights. "She is listed as the co-host," he said quietly. Mercer's eyes narrowed. I asked you to verify the packet, not interpret it. Ross looked down again, though there was nothing left to interpret. The name matched. The photograph matched. The event schedule placed Naomi behind the table that now lay on its side. Still, Mercer did not return her identification. Naomi glanced toward the scattered papers. Less than an hour earlier, she had arrived alone through the side entrance with 2 canvas bags filled with constituent files. She had refused the offer of a driver because the hall was only 12 miles from her district office, and she had wanted time to arrange every folder herself. Housing requests on the left. School funding concerns in the center. Police accountability complaints on the right. Her father had once told her that public service began with remembering that every sheet of paper represented a person who had already waited too long. She had kept that lesson through law school, civil rights cases, and her first campaign for the state senate. Nothing about the quiet hall had suggested danger when she arrived. The custodian had unlocked the storage room. Thomas Reed had helped unfold chairs. Naomi had placed her own nameplate at the center of the table without ceremony. She had never imagined that simplicity would be used as evidence against her. "Officer Mercer," she said, "you now have confirmation from your partner and my staff. Return my identification and allow us to restore the room." "The event has not started yet," Mercer replied. "That does not make the space yours." Elena drew a careful breath. "The governor's office will arrive in approximately 15 minutes. We need to finish setting up." Mercer gave a dismissive glance toward the stage. "The governor is attending. He is co-hosting the listening session. Then security should be tighter, not looser." Naomi studied him. Every fact seemed to harden the conclusion he had already chosen. Her presence had become suspicious because she lacked an escort. Her identification became questionable because it contradicted his assumption. Her assistant's confirmation became interference. Even the governor's arrival became another reason to distrust her. "What exactly do you believe I have done?" Naomi asked. Mercer folded her identification card between 2 fingers. "You entered a restricted section and represented yourself as an elected official. This is a public community hall. The front table is restricted. My name is printed on the event sheet for that table." He glanced toward Ross. "Was the room secured when you arrived?" Ross hesitated. The exterior doors were being monitored. Senator Bennett entered through the authorized side entrance. Mercer turned toward him fully. "You saw her enter?" "No, but the custodian confirmed she arrived before our shift." "Then you did not see authorization." Ross's discomfort deepened. Thomas remained near the first row, his phone held steadily at chest height. Behind him, several early attendees had begun entering through the main doors. They slowed when they saw the overturned table and the papers across the floor. A mother holding a school folder drew her young son closer. An elderly man removed his hat and stared at Mercer. The silence was no longer empty. It had witnesses. Naomi looked toward the ceiling camera. A small green indicator showed the public stream was active. She had approved the early broadcast so residents unable to attend could watch the setup and submit questions online. Mercer still had not noticed it. "Officer," Naomi said, "you have had 3 opportunities to verify my identity. And you have had 3 opportunities to cooperate." "Cooperate with what?" "Step away from the restricted area and wait outside." Elena's voice sharpened. "You are ordering the elected host of a public meeting out of her own event." Mercer pointed toward the door. "You can wait outside too." Ross stepped forward at last. "Sir, the photograph matches. The schedule matches." The assistant confirmed her identity. "We should end this." Mercer stared at him, the room quiet enough to hear the air system humming above them. "You are allowing a crowd to influence your judgment." Ross looked at the papers on the floor, then at Naomi's identification in Mercer's hand. "No, sir. I am allowing the facts to influence it." Mercer's expression changed the moment Ross invoked the facts. It was not surprise. It was the look of a man who believed loyalty should matter more than accuracy. "Step back to the entrance," he ordered. Ross remained where he was. The event packet identifies Senator Bennett as the host. Her state identification matches the photograph. There is no security violation. Mercer lowered Naomi's card but still did not return it. You are not in charge of this scene. Neither are assumptions, Naomi said. More residents entered the hall, slowing as they noticed the scattered folders and overturned table. A teacher holding a yellow envelope stood near the aisle. Two neighborhood business owners stopped beside Thomas Reed, who continued recording without speaking. The public stream above the stage captured every new arrival. Elena moved toward the laptop on the chair and checked the event dashboard. Her eyes widened. The broadcast had already attracted hundreds of viewers. Messages were appearing from constituents asking why the meeting had not begun and why the senator's table was on the floor. She turned the screen away from Mercer and whispered, "The stream is live." Naomi gave a small nod. She had already suspected it. Mercer pointed toward Thomas. "Put the phone away." Thomas held it steady. "I am attending a public meeting in a public hall. You are interfering with security. I have not moved from this spot." Mercer looked around the room, measuring the growing number of witnesses. Everyone needs to clear the front section. No one moved. Naomi looked down at a housing file resting near her shoe. "May I retrieve my constituents' documents?" "No, what law prevents me from picking up my own papers?" "This area is being controlled until your identity is verified." Ross raised the briefing packet. "Her identity has been verified." Mercer's voice sharpened. "That is enough." The words echoed against the high ceiling. Naomi waited until the room became still again. "The time is 6:47 in the evening," she said. "Officer Mercer has received confirmation from his partner, my legislative assistant, the official event sheet, and my state identification. He continues to hold my identification and prevent access to constituent records." Mercer stepped closer, stopping several feet away. "You are attempting to provoke a reaction. I am documenting yours." Elena glanced toward the entrance. The governor's advance team was expected within minutes. She could have called them immediately, but Naomi lifted one hand slightly, signaling her not to. Naomi did not want the truth rescued by a title before the record was complete. Mercer needed no more evidence of her identity. What remained was evidence of his choice. Ross closed the briefing packet. "Sir, return the identification. Go back to your post. I cannot support removing the confirmed host from her own event." Mercer stared at him. "Think carefully about your career." Ross swallowed, but his posture remained firm. "I am." Thomas lowered himself slowly and picked up one folder from the floor. Mercer turned toward him. "I told everyone to stay back." Thomas examined the label on the folder. It contained unresolved complaints submitted by residents who believed their reports against local officers had been ignored. "These papers belong to the people in this room," he said. He handed the folder to Naomi. A woman near the aisle bent down and collected several pens. The teacher retrieved a stack of school funding letters. Then another resident stepped forward. Within seconds, people across the hall began gathering the scattered documents in complete silence. Mercer stood in the center of the room issuing no new command. The crowd was not challenging him physically. They were simply restoring what he had disrupted. Naomi accepted each folder and placed it carefully on an upright chair. The balance of the room had shifted without anyone raising a voice. Mercer still wore the uniform. He still held her identification. But the moral authority he had claimed was disappearing with every page returned to her hands. Then the rear doors opened, and footsteps entered from the hallway behind Naomi. Governor Daniel Whitmore entered through the rear doors beside Chief Margaret Doyle and two members of the advance team. He had expected to find a prepared hall, a waiting audience, and Senator Naomi Bennett reviewing the evening agenda. Instead, he saw residents kneeling to gather papers, an overturned table near the stage, and Officer Grant Mercer standing with Naomi's identification card still between his fingers. Whitmore slowed. His gaze moved across the room before settling on Naomi. "Senator Bennett," he said, "why is your constituent briefing on the floor?" The question carried no accusation, only confusion, but Mercer's posture changed immediately. He looked at Naomi, then at the identification card in his hand, as though the printed name had become legible for the first time. Naomi did not answer at once. She accepted a folder from Thomas Reed, checked that the pages were in order, and placed it carefully on the chair beside her. Officer Mercer believed I was not authorized to stand behind my own table, she said. Whitmore looked toward Mercer. Is that accurate? Mercer straightened. Governor, I encountered an unidentified person inside a restricted area and followed security procedure. Ross stepped forward before the explanation could harden into the official version. Her identity was confirmed several minutes ago, sir. The event sheet, her state identification, her assistant, and the briefing packet all matched. Chief Doyle turned toward him. And after confirmation? Ross glanced at Mercer, then back at the chief. The detention continued. Officer Mercer kept her identification and prevented her from retrieving the constituent files. Mercer's face tightened. Officer Ross is leaving out the lack of cooperation. Naomi looked directly at him. What lawful instruction did I refuse? He opened his mouth but did not answer. Elena moved to the laptop and turned the screen toward Whitmore and Doyle. The live event page showed a rapidly increasing viewer count. Comments were appearing faster than she could read them. The public stream began before the incident, she said. Everything from the table being overturned has been broadcast and automatically archived. Doyle's eyes shifted to the camera above the stage. The green indicator remained steady. Mercer followed her gaze, and the color drained from his expression. He had noticed the phones. He had noticed the body cameras. He had not noticed the one record he could not order anyone to stop. Whitmore stepped toward Naomi, but he did not position himself in front of her or speak on her behalf. What do you need right now? He asked. The meeting needs to begin on time, Naomi replied. The documents need to be restored. Every recording must be preserved. And this incident must be reviewed by someone outside the department. Doyle nodded. I will secure both body camera files and remove Officer Mercer from event duty pending review. Mercer turned toward her. Chief, this is being exaggerated because she is a senator. Naomi's eyes settled on him. No. It matters because you believed I was not. The room became still again. Whitmore looked at the overturned table, then at the residents holding folders and pens. Who saw the entire encounter? Nearly every hand in the front half of the hall rose. Thomas kept his phone lifted. Elena pointed toward the live stream archive. Ross placed the briefing packet on the nearest chair, open to Naomi's photograph and official roll. The truth no longer depended on one title or one powerful witness. It existed in dozens of places at once. Chief Doyle extended her hand toward Mercer. Return the identification. For the first time that evening, he complied without argument. Naomi took the card, examined it briefly, and placed it inside her jacket. Then she looked toward the people still standing around the scattered table. Let us finish restoring the room, she said. Whitmore bent down and picked up a bottled water near his shoe. Doyle lifted one end of the folding table. Thomas took the other. Together, they set it upright. Mercer remained near the wall as the community rebuilt in silence what his judgment had disrupted. Chief Doyle asked Mercer to step into the side corridor, while the event team finished rebuilding the front of the hall. He did not argue, but the silence around him had changed. It was no longer the silence of people waiting for his next command. It was the silence of a room that had stopped granting him authority. Ross remained near the entrance, holding the briefing packet against his chest as residents returned folders to Naomi one by one. Elena checked the live stream archive and confirmed that the recording had been saved automatically to the state server. The complete feed is secure, she said. The body cameras should show the same sequence. Naomi placed the last housing file back on the table and straightened the silver nameplate. State Senator Naomi Bennett. The words had been there from the beginning. Mercer had not lacked information. He had rejected it. Governor Whitmore moved to the first row rather than the stage. This is your meeting, he told Naomi. I am here to listen. She nodded, but before taking her seat, she looked toward Chief Doyle. I want the review handled outside your department. Doyle accepted the request without defensiveness. I will refer the incident to the Attorney General's Public Integrity Unit tonight. Include the event packet, assignment records, both body cameras, the public stream, and every witness statement. They will all be preserved. Ross stepped closer. His voice was quiet. Senator, I should have spoken sooner. Naomi studied him for a moment. When did you recognize me? Before the table was overturned. The admission cost him something. It showed in the way his shoulders lowered. Why did you stay silent? She asked. Ross glanced toward the corridor where Mercer stood with Doyle. He trained me. I thought correcting him in front of people would make the situation worse. Thomas Reed, still holding his phone, spoke from the first row. It got worse because no one corrected him. Ross nodded. Yes, sir. Naomi did not offer easy forgiveness. Then tell the investigators exactly that. Do not rewrite your delay as caution. I will not. The hall clock showed 6:58. Residents filled nearly every chair. Some had come to discuss rent increases. Others carried school forms, business permits, and unresolved complaints about local policing. The event was supposed to begin in 2 minutes. Naomi looked down at the table that had been overturned, then at the people who had helped raise it. We are starting on time, she said. Elena opened the agenda. Whitmore sat beside Thomas instead of taking the center seat. Chief Doyle returned from the corridor alone. Officer Mercer has been removed from duty for the evening, she said. His access to the incident reporting system has been suspended pending the independent review. Naomi nodded once. That is a temporary administrative action, not a conclusion. Doyle seemed surprised by the restraint in her voice. Correct. Then let the evidence determine the rest. Naomi stepped behind the table and faced the room. The public stream was still running, but the viewer count no longer mattered. What mattered were the people holding folders in their laps, waiting to be heard. Before we begin, she said, I want everyone to understand why tonight cannot be reduced to a misunderstanding about my title. The problem was not that an officer failed to recognize a senator. The problem was that he believed a black woman he considered powerless could be removed, ignored, and humiliated without consequence. No one applauded. The words were too serious for applause. Naomi opened the first folder. This meeting was created for people whose concerns were dismissed before anyone checked the facts. We will not repeat that failure here. Thomas lowered his phone. Ross returned to his post near the entrance, standing straighter than before. Whitmore took out a pen. Across the hall, dozens of residents did the same. The first person stepped toward the microphone, and Naomi looked up. Please tell us what happened, she said. The first speaker was a grandmother named Lillian Price, who had waited 11 months for a response to a complaint involving her grandson. She stood at the microphone with both hands wrapped around a worn manila folder. I was told the report could not be found, she said. Naomi opened the matching copy from the stack Mercer had scattered across the floor. The date, case number, and receiving officer were printed clearly on the first page. Chief Doyle leaned forward in her seat. Governor Whitmore stopped writing. This report was submitted 3 times, Naomi said. We will request the full record tonight. Lillian nodded, but relief did not reach her face. She had heard promises before. Naomi understood that trust would not return because a powerful room finally became attentive. It would return only if someone followed the paper after everyone went home. One resident after another approached the microphone. A restaurant owner described repeated permit delays that no neighboring business had faced. A high school counselor spoke about students who stopped reporting harassment because they believed no adult would listen. Thomas Reed described a traffic complaint he had filed 6 months earlier after being questioned outside his own store. Ross stood at the entrance and listened as details from those stories echoed the assumptions he had watched Mercer make that evening. No one accused him directly, yet each account seemed to ask what his silence had protected. The meeting continued for nearly 2 hours. Naomi did not rush a speaker or offer conclusions before hearing the facts. Elena recorded every case number. Whitmore asked short questions and made no speeches. Doyle requested copies of the unresolved police complaints, then sent a written notice to the department ordering that no related files be altered, deleted, or reassigned. Shortly before the meeting ended, Attorney General Rebecca Sloan called Naomi through the secure line on Elena's laptop. The Public Integrity Unit had accepted the referral. An independent team would collect the archived stream, the body camera recordings, the security assignment documents, and Mercer's previous complaint history before the next shift began. You will receive the same process as every other witness, Sloan said. Naomi looked toward the resident seated before her. That is exactly what I want. After the final speaker returned to her chair, the room settled into a tired quiet. Papers were stacked again. Empty water bottles rested beneath seats. The repaired table stood at the front with a faint scrape along one edge where it had struck the floor. Naomi ran her fingertips over the mark. It was small, but visible under the overhead light. Whitmore approached without his staff. I am sorry this happened, he said. Naomi turned toward him. Do not let the apology become the ending. It will not. Then make sure the review includes the people who did not have a live camera or a governor walking through the door. Whitmore looked at Lillian's folder, then toward Thomas. It will. Near the entrance, Ross waited until the last residents had left. He approached Chief Doyle and handed her his body camera before she asked. The recording began when we entered the building, he said. I also want to submit a supplemental statement. Doyle studied him. About Mercer. About myself. Naomi heard the answer from across the room. She did not smile, but something in her expression softened. Accountability had begun to move beyond accusation and into truth. Elena closed the laptop. The public stream had ended, but copies of it were already saved in 3 separate systems. Naomi gathered the last folder and placed it in her canvas bag. Outside, evening rain had begun tapping lightly against the tall windows. The hall no longer felt like a place where she had been told she did not belong. It felt like a place that had finally been forced to decide who it was meant to serve. Before turning off the lights, Naomi placed her nameplate at the center of the table and faced it toward the empty chairs. Then she whispered the same words she had spoken to every resident that night. Tell me what happened. The independent review began before sunrise. Investigators from Attorney General Rebecca Sloan's Public Integrity Unit arrived at the Eastwood Community Hall while the floor still smelled faintly of rain and cleaning polish. They photographed the scraped table, collected the archived public stream, downloaded both body camera recordings, and sealed the security packet that Mercer had refused to trust. By noon, the incident was no longer a disagreement between two people. It was a timeline. Mercer had seen Naomi's name on the event schedule. His body camera captured Ross identifying her before the table was overturned. The public stream recorded Elena confirming her position. Naomi's state identification had remained in Mercer's hand for 9 minutes after every available source verified who she was. Yet the most troubling discovery did not come from that evening. It came from the department archive. Investigators found 6 earlier complaints involving Mercer. 3 described black residents being removed from public buildings after officers claimed they did not belong there. 2 involved identification documents that Mercer had dismissed as suspicious without verification. Another came from a city employee who had been ordered away from her own office during a weekend inspection. None of the complaints had resulted in formal discipline. Each had been closed with nearly identical language: misunderstanding, security concern, insufficient evidence. The archived body camera footage told a different story. Ross spent 4 hours with investigators. He did not describe himself as brave. He explained exactly when he recognized Naomi, when he saw Mercer reject the evidence, and why he waited. I was afraid that correcting him would damage my career, he said. So I protected my future instead of protecting the person in front of me. His admission led investigators to examine the department's field training system. Younger officers had repeatedly been encouraged to support senior officers publicly and raise concerns only after an incident ended. The policy was unofficial, but its effects were visible in report after report. Chief Doyle received the preliminary findings in her office 3 weeks later. The document did not accuse every officer of prejudice, but it described a culture where certainty was rewarded more quickly than verification and loyalty was often confused with silence. Governor Whitmore read the same report at the state capitol. He called Naomi that evening. The findings are broader than Mercer, he said. Naomi stood beside her office window, looking down at commuters moving through the rain. They were always broader than Mercer. The public will expect an immediate response. Then give them a complete one. She asked that the old complaints be reopened, that independent reviewers examine future allegations involving public access, and that officers receive clear authority to interrupt a colleague before misconduct became an official report. Whitmore agreed, but Naomi added one condition. Do not name the reforms after me. He paused. Why not? Because people should not need a senator's name attached before their rights are taken seriously. That same week, Attorney General Sloan announced that Mercer would face a formal disciplinary hearing and an independent civil rights inquiry. The announcement did not declare him guilty. It described the evidence, the process, and the allegations with careful precision. Naomi watched from her district office while Elena organized the constituent files recovered from the hall. On the corner of Naomi's desk rested the silver nameplate Mercer had knocked to the floor. A shallow dent marked one edge. Elena offered to replace it. Naomi shook her head. Leave it. As a reminder. As a record. Outside, the rain began to clear. Sunlight touched the damaged metal, and the word State Senator Naomi Bennett became visible across the room. The title had never made her worthy of respect. It had only revealed how differently Mercer behaved once power walked in behind her. 10 months after the night at Eastwood Community Hall, the disciplinary hearing concluded inside a state administrative courtroom with no cameras and no audience applause. The evidence did not depend on Naomi's title. It depended on the event sheet Mercer refused to read, the identification he continued holding after verification, the body camera footage, the archived public stream, Ross's testimony, and the 6 earlier complaints that had been closed without meaningful review. The hearing officer found that Mercer had violated department policy, failed to follow basic verification procedures, made inaccurate statements in his incident report, and treated Naomi differently after assuming she had no authority. He was dismissed from the department following the required appeals process. The Attorney General's civil rights inquiry remained separate, examining whether the pattern extended beyond administrative misconduct. Chief Doyle announced the findings at a public meeting but did not describe the outcome as a single bad officer being removed. A department fails, she said, when its systems repeatedly allow warning signs to be ignored. Under the new policy, officers assigned to public events were required to verify credentials before taking enforcement action, body camera footage connected to disputed access incidents received automatic preservation, and junior officers were given a direct duty to interrupt conduct that lacked a lawful basis. Ross agreed to participate in the first training session. He stood before a room of academy recruits with no prepared speech and told them exactly where he had failed. I recognized the senator, he said. I saw the photograph. I heard the confirmation. I still waited because I was afraid of challenging the officer who trained me. One recruit asked whether speaking sooner would have ended his career. Ross looked down for a moment. I do not know, he answered. But staying silent nearly helped end someone else's trust in the law. Naomi watched a recording of that session from her district office. She did not call Ross courageous. Courage had come late. But late honesty, when followed by action, could still prevent another failure. Governor Whitmore signed an executive directive requiring independent review of public access complaints across state agencies. Attorney General Sloan reopened the older cases connected to Mercer, and several residents finally received formal hearings. Lillian Price's missing complaint was located in an inactive digital folder, where it had been misclassified and never assigned. Thomas Reed's traffic complaint was reopened with an outside investigator. The restaurant owner received a new permit review conducted by a different office. None of these outcomes erased the months they had waited, but the system had finally stopped pretending their records did not exist. Naomi returned to Eastwood Hall a week before the next listening session. The repaired folding table stood in storage, its metal frame straight again, though the scrape along one edge remained visible. Elena asked whether they should replace it. Naomi ran her hand across the mark. No, she said. Set it up exactly where it was. On the evening of the new meeting, residents arrived early. Thomas helped place the chairs. Lillian carried a fresh copy of her complaint. Ross attended in plain clothes and sat near the back, not as security, but as a witness to what accountability looked like after the cameras were gone. Governor Whitmore entered quietly and took a seat in the second row. He did not walk onto the stage. Naomi placed the dented silver nameplate at the center of the restored table, opened the first folder, and looked across the room. Tonight, she said, We begin with the people who were told they did not belong in the record. Pens clicked open across the hall. No one applauded. They simply began to write. The second listening session lasted until the hall clock passed 9. Naomi heard every speaker without rushing them, and the restored table remained steady beneath folders that had once been scattered across the floor. Lillian Price received a written timeline for the review of her grandson's complaint. Thomas Reed was assigned an outside investigator and given direct access to the case portal. The restaurant owner received a hearing date before leaving the building. None of those steps were dramatic, but Naomi knew real reform rarely arrived with dramatic music. It arrived through names entered correctly, deadlines kept, records preserved, and people receiving answers without needing someone powerful to stand behind them. Near the back of the room, Ross took notes in silence. When the final resident returned to her seat, he approached the table and waited until Naomi looked up. "I wanted you to know the Academy adopted the intervention policy," he said. "Every recruit now has to demonstrate how to stop an unsupported detention, even when the senior officer disagrees." Naomi closed the folder in front of her. "A policy is only useful when someone follows it under pressure." "I know." He glanced toward the scrape along the table's edge. "I think about that night every shift." "Thinking is not the same as changing." "No," he said. "But I am trying to make sure the next officer speaks before the damage is done." Naomi studied him, then nodded once. It was not absolution. It was recognition that accountability could become more than punishment if a person allowed the truth to reshape his choices. Governor Whitmore remained in the second row until the room was nearly empty. He approached without staff or cameras. The statewide review identified 14 public access complaints that had been closed without sufficient investigation, he said. 9 have been reopened. "What about the other 5? Naomi asked. 3 lacked recoverable records. 2 families have not responded. Keep trying." Whitmore gave a tired smile. "You never let a partial answer sound complete." People waited too long for complete answers. Elena began packing the remaining files, but Naomi left the dented nameplate in place. Across the hall, the ceiling camera was dark now. There was no live audience beyond the room, no sudden entrance to expose wrongdoing, and no viral moment waiting to force action. Yet the people who had returned still expected the same fairness. That, Naomi believed, was the real test. Justice had to function after attention moved elsewhere. Before leaving, Thomas and Lillian folded the last row of chairs. Ross carried the empty water cases to the storage room. Whitmore helped Elena secure the document boxes. Naomi stood alone behind the table for a moment, listening to the soft scrape of chair legs and the clicking of pens being placed back into bags. The room sounded different from the night Mercer had declared she did not belong. That night, silence had been used to isolate her. Now silence held the quiet work of people repairing trust together. Naomi lifted the silver nameplate and traced the shallow dent with her thumb. She could have replaced it, polished away the damage, and allowed the surface to pretend nothing had happened. Instead, she placed it inside her canvas bag. The mark was not a symbol of humiliation anymore. It was evidence that dignity could be challenged without being surrendered. At the door, Lillian looked back. "Senator, do you think the system really changed?" Naomi considered the question before answering. "A system changes every time someone refuses to let an injustice become routine." Outside, the night air was cool and clear. The governor walked toward an ordinary state vehicle. Ross headed to the parking lot alone. Elena waited beside Naomi with the last box of files. Behind them, the repaired table stood beneath the empty lights, ready for the next meeting. Naomi turned off the hall lights, leaving only the exit sign glowing above the door. The lesson was not that power had finally recognized her title. It was that no title should have been necessary for the truth to matter. And the question remained for everyone who had watched, listened, or once stayed silent: when someone is treated as though they do not belong, will you wait for a powerful person to enter the room, or will you be the first one to stand beside them?